All right. As Jake mentioned, we are talking for the next 40 minutes, testing your attention span, about prediction markets. My name's Henry. I'm an investor with Castle Island Ventures, based here in Boston. My colleague and mentor, Wyatt, gave a great talk on stablecoins earlier today. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves real quick, maybe just quick name and your relationship to prediction markets. We'll start there.
I guess I'll start. My name's Mike. I've been betting for a while. Been in crypto, code stuff, just gamble. I don't know. That's about it.
Hey guys, I'm Eli. I'm an investor in Multicoin. We're invested in a handful of prediction market and prediction market related companies. Also a very casual sports bettor.
I'm Nick from Melee Markets, which is a permissionless prediction market with uncapped upside building on Solana.
Hey everyone, I'm Jerry. I work on the BD and growth team at Solana Foundation. One of the things I focus on is what we call speculative entertainment, and a big part of that is prediction markets. So excited today.
Great, thank you. Obviously, prediction markets in the last year have become a kind of new topic du jour, a meta, you might say. Kicking off with the election last year, kind of brought Polymarket and Kalshi, both of which have been around for a while, but really into the hype. And so hoping to kind of get in today why that might be the case. But maybe, Nick, I'll start with you about, we're at Solana Boston. I'm interested again to do why prediction markets need to live on blockchains. I think for Polymarket in particular and for other prediction markets, crypto was just a way for people to get onto a non-US domiciled gambling exchange. But going forward, as these things become regulated, as these things become a new financial primitive, what is the role of blockchains when it comes to the technology underlying prediction markets?
I mean, an immediate benefit for us is just the access to the Solana community, which is, pretty in line with the ICP that we're trying to target. From a more technical perspective, starting on chain for Polymarket, for example, was more of a regulatory thing. But obviously, Kalshi proves out it's not absolutely necessary to have your infrastructure on chain. I mean, they live completely off chain right now. Obviously, are trying to move on chain as we speak. But I think the core benefits of being a prediction market on chain are the same benefits of having any financial asset on chain, which we all enjoy, particularly composability about your finances, right? A prediction market fundamentally is just another financial instrument. Instead of speculating on earnings, if you're in a stock or something like that, you're just speculating on the outcome of a real world event. And so the ability to have that financialized and then refinancialize it on top, have composability with other financial systems is as valuable as it is for any other segment in blockchain.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. And then, Jerry, maybe I'll pass it over to you here from the perspective of Solana, of the foundation, of someone who's working in the ecosystem today, who has a good sense of what these apps are doing. What's it going to take for prediction markets to kind of take the next step here as maybe both a social media phenomenon as well as a financial primitive?
It's a great question. Just one more thing to add to Nick's point about the composability. One thing we're excited about here is if you have prediction markets on chain, you could plug that into other DeFi infrastructure that's available in the ecosystem. So if you are betting the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl, right? That's kind of your months-long position, and it's slowly appreciating value as the games are played. Can you collateralize that and then maybe borrow against your position that might be pretty deep in the money? That's just one quick note to add. Back to your question. So, sorry, the question was...
what's it going to take to for prediction markets to take the next step, both in kind of the social media perspective, virality, as well as, as a financial primitive of not just kind of us crypto Twitter people using them?
Yeah, I think one big unlock would be regulatory clarity, specifically around the sports market for prediction markets. I think it's a huge part of volume that I think Kalshi is leaning into pretty heavily. If you've seen recent volume, Kalshi has surpassed Polymarket, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it's during when football season has just started. So I think the sports piece is a big part. Like, will DraftKings, will FanDuel try to hold on to their piece of speculation in sports? But I think another part is, aside from sports, what are the markets that are worth making prediction markets around? Obviously, politics, war, these are two big ones. There's one interesting tweet I saw, I think earlier this week, where like you need markets that have both a high addressable market, where like lots of people are interested in them and care about them, but also are easy to market make for, right? Like the resolution for geopolitics is pretty straightforward. For sports betting, right? Like there are tons of models over decades that help you predict, which way the outcome is going to go. But for things like pop culture or other like social viral concepts, I think they're great for marketing, and whether or not it'd be easy to market make and take the other end of that and provide liquidity will be a key question for those segments.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And Mike, maybe I'll let you double click on that right now from the trader's perspective. Who's actually using these platforms today? What does it look like from the trader perspective? And also, who are the individuals, the businesses, the whoever that are actually doing the market making and the liquidity providing today?
Yeah, so it kind of, I guess it changes or varies based on the platform. Kalshi has definitely more professionals involved. Anywhere from, professional finance trading firms like Susquehanna. They're pretty big quoters on Fed markets, sports, anything they're pretty comfortable with. They'll never touch the exotic stuff because they just don't know how to price it, and it's not really worth their time. But for Polymarket, there's actually a lot of, just retail like me that can, spin up a bot or, just kind of punting on markets. And it really depends on, I think Polymarket's gotten away with it because it's kind of less regulatory to start, and they're kind of going towards a more regulatory front. But it's just a combination. And Kalshi just integrated through Robinhood. And so they'll have like a lot of, soft flow from, sports markets there. But the markets are changing. Like the exchange model is really big outside the U.S. In the U.S. here, we have anyone from your local bookie to the DraftKings, the FanDuels, and they charge actually incredibly high fees. So when this exchange model comes to market and the demand picks up, it's really gonna change that game a lot. And I'd be pretty worried if I was a DraftKings.
Saying that in the home of DraftKings, Boston.
Yeah.
Jerry, Eli, I'll kick this one to you actually. On the topic of sports betting, Jerry mentioned this a little bit earlier, but what's your sense on like how much demand there is for markets outside of politics and sports, which have really shown themselves to have the most consistent both interest and enough events on a consistent basis for people to bet on? Kalshi and Polymarket seem, especially this NFL season, to be really leaning into the sports betting side of things. Is that where you see the direction of this kind of sub-industry going, or is there kind of more out there?
Yeah, like I think if you look at the data, obviously a lot of volume goes into sports and things like that. But I think that, if we fast forward a year, 2 years, 3 years plus from now, indices is something I'm particularly excited about. I think that there are a lot of markets related to a single topic. For example, like the Fed. There's rate cuts by the end of the year. There's rate cuts at the next meeting. There's whatever will Trump say. What will what will someone say at the meeting? Things like that. And there's an opportunity to kind of aggregate the prices of those various markets into a single number that people can trade. Call it like a hawkish or dovish, monetary policy stance, or one on like the Middle East. Is it conflict, or is it trending towards peace? And I think a lot of retail, at least, would rather trade a single number related to a topic that they understand, rather than kind of like very specific idiosyncratic markets. So I think that's an interesting opportunity. I think it's still related to politics, and it could be still or economy or whatever. But I think it's a new type of market that we'll see become more popular in the next few years.
Yep, I think that makes sense. And Nick, maybe I'll let you take this one and let you maybe preach on Melee here for a second. As someone who's building a new kind of 0 to 1 prediction market, I'd love it if you could touch on, what you think needs to exist from a use case or a mechanism perspective that doesn't exist today in existing prediction markets, and maybe the technical feasibility of some of these features that people have been calling for, whether it's parlays, leverage on prediction markets, permissionless market creation, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, to touch on the market topic that might be interesting beyond like geopolitics and sports, I think the reason why we have PMF and prediction markets on those topics is because they're easy to price. They happen with like relative frequency. If I'm a market maker, I can have models that tell me how good a football team is against another football team, and price pretty confidently in that, and have sufficient liquidity to make my positions easy to exit, which is where I think there will continue to be PMF in the markets that have a traditional market structure, which is on a CLOB or on an AMM. Some are iterating on with outcomes that are priced 0 if you're wrong and 1 if you're correct. But what Melee is doing is iterating on the underlying pricing mechanic for prediction markets, which allows for an easier experience for bootstrapping liquidity for markets, which allows for permissionless markets to actually exist, right? So the idea of a permissionless prediction market is that anyone can make any market on any topic, which is a good idea in theory, because if you can have anyone create a topic on their sub-vertical, then they're going to tap into their audience and all attention can be speculated on. But if I can't price it as a market maker, if I'm sitting in my office in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, in the Susquehanna example, there's no way for me to be able to know, like, Jerry, am I going to win in a basketball game, right? So by iterating on the underlying price mechanisms and incentivizing early liquidity, you can have different markets that are spun up on a wider range of topics, which we believe that the most viral topics for prediction markets haven't actually been created yet because of the constraints that have been put on us previously in market creation. So we've all kind of met individual people over time and then seen them in like on TV, for example, and each of us didn't know that the other person knew that person, but once we saw them on TV, everyone was like, oh yeah, of course, that guy, he's there, right? So I feel like there are social viral topics like that are kind of in the whisper network, but aren't necessarily surfaced because of the difficulty of pricing them. But if you move to a pricing model which Melee has adopted, then some of those newer and more interesting niche topics can be surfaced.
Eli, I'm curious from the investor perspective, what else you guys might be seeing within the prediction market space when it comes to these kind of new financialization mechanisms, whether it be leverage or anything else.
Yeah, I think, well, actually, I guess if I would take your question a little more broadly, just like what is interesting from an investment perspective. I think like new front ends are in the next, call it 12 months. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Like I think Kalshi solved the hard problem of like, can you build an exchange, like a compliant exchange for people to trade these contracts? But now people want better discovery or social features or better execution tools, things like that. So, I think there's a big opportunity to build, whether it's pro trading terminals or very vertical prediction markets that do stuff around discovery of new markets and reputation for traders and status games within those and things like that. That's where I'm spending a lot of time and personally where I'm really excited about.
Mike, there's another side of these markets when it comes to the mechanisms and how they work, and that has to do with the resolution. Obviously, all these markets, when they get split up, there's a pretty discrete definition of what you're betting on, how long this market will last, and what's going to resolve it to a yes or a no or whatever the binary outcome might be. Just this week, there's always kind of within the polymarket Kalshi world, there's these little sub controversies, I'd call them, that happen, and the one this week was around this market that had to do with an influencer that's trying to do a 40-day fast where he can only drink water. As he started, and as the market's gone on, Polymarket, who was kind of helping him advertise this, they obviously want volume on their platform. They've kind of added some addendums and have slowly changed the definition of what the resolution might be, what might be a yes, what might be a no. And I think some traders were a little confused. What exactly am I betting on here? Who's my counterparty? Why is Polymarket, this centralized entity, able to change this? And then on the other side, you have the UMA token, the UMA protocol. For those who may not know, there's a totally separate token that actually goes into resolving these markets on Polymarket. If there is a dispute, if someone says, actually, this shouldn't be a yes, it should be a no, the vote actually goes to this wholly different protocol. There's a lot of questions about, is that actually the way this should work? So long question, but maybe I'll let you speak on that, of what you see, the pros and cons of how that's set up today and how maybe it should change.
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's kind of a mess for some markets. I think overall they do get it right, though. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but definitely wasn't a suit. And people need to realize that when they make these markets, it's kind of like a balancing act between demand and okay, if I make a market, I need to be comfortable my ecosystem can quote it. But then at the same time, they'll make markets for viral moments, and these guys have kind of touched on that. Like, for example, the guys who left the prison escapees in New Orleans, that was a funny market. Who would get caught first? Obviously, that's not going to do a lot of volume, but it's gonna trend. People are gonna realize that. People are gonna come up with it. For those descriptions, that's pretty clear cut. And if you make the description too clear cut, then you're not gonna have that person being like, but maybe I could trade the other way. So you need a little bit of that, but maybe, but enough of a definition that your entire user base is not gonna be pissed off at you. If you look at these markets enough and you kind of sift through, not Kalshi, but Polymarket is all open, it's on chain, you can track everything. I mean, there's literally wallets that I can tell you today that if they are buying a market, they're gonna win. They know where the votes are coming from. They've somehow either bribed them or they know what's going on behind the scenes. And people will get mad at that, but the truth is that's the concept of a market. That is the accurate pricing. If an insider knows what's going to happen, the market price should reflect that. It's like getting mad that Tom Brady's getting all the calls, and then you bet against him. It doesn't make any sense. You need to use all the available information you have, and make the best decision. I think it'll get better. I don't really think there's any right answer. Maybe the Kalshi model is better, where it's 3 people, they don't really know their decisions. People might not even know who they are, so they can't be attacked or bribed or whatever. I think that answers it. Maybe.
Yeah, no, it does. Jerry, maybe I'll pass that for a little bit of a continuation to you on the insider trading piece. I think there has been kind of some accusation of insider trading on some of these more niche markets. I think one of the most interesting examples is that there have been markets recently around, will Israel strike Yemen on this day? And those markets, people found, were starting to move about 30 to 10 minutes before the actual airstrikes launched, as if there were people in Israel in the know that knew that was coming and decided to financialize that information. Some other people have made accusations. There are markets that have to do with MicroStrategy. Will MicroStrategy buy Bitcoin this week? Michael Saylor notoriously buys Bitcoin every week. There have been certain weeks where, he's decided not to buy Bitcoin, and for whatever reason, the market, people knew that was going to happen. I'm the people making those accusations. I was on the wrong side of that trade. But Jerry, I'll pass this to you, with the question being, on the spectrum of these things are going to be are going to have to be regulated to a certain extent. Kalshi's already regulated by the CFTC. Polymarket's moving into the U.S., wants to be regulated by the CFTC. So there's no way they can be regulated and allow for this sort of insider trading to run rampant. To the other end of the spectrum being Polymarket especially is trying to play into this narrative of, we're the news now. Cancel your Wall Street Journal subscription. Polymarket is where the news breaks first because these markets break the news. And that might be, if you have inside information, you have the news. And these markets might want to lead into insider trading because they want the news first. And maybe that's the value of these platforms, is to be kind of the oracle of the truth, whether it's insider information or not. So I'm curious where you think that should resolve. Should these platforms be okay with insider trading? Is that just the way it's going to exist? Or, where do you see that going from here?
It's a really great question. Tough to answer a question about insider trading from the Solana guy, but I would say I wouldn't cast it so black and white. I think I would call this informed trading, and I think it's here to stay. Like you said, like Polymarket really is branding as a news outlet, the first place where you hear truth, right? And so if you really think about like if your media can't be trusted and you're looking for what's actually happening, then you look to where there's financial upside and positioning accordingly. For Polymarket, I think it makes a lot of sense because when people do look at these platforms as a source of truth, it makes, not only are you leaning into it from a virality pathway, but also there's financial upside to it too. I would categorize differently as like things that like might be manipulated. So I think if you have information, call it MNPI. If you obtained it legally, I think it would be okay to trade on, but that's different from manipulating. So like there were some really great examples of like a person bet that there will be a streaker at the Super Bowl, and it turns out he bought all the shares and he became the person who streaked and he won. Or like previously there was a stint where it was viral to throw green dildos on WNBA games, right? Like you could buy up all the shares and then throw the dildo yourself, right? So these things I would maybe lean away from, but when it is information on a large scale that you obtained legally and you're not using it to manipulate the market, I do think there's room to play for those types of traders now in prediction markets.
Nick, I'm curious how you think about that from Melee's perspective when building permissionless market creation. I might think that I'm incentivized to create a market when I feel that I am informed. For example, like, there's a popular type of market, which is like a mention market. Like what will Donald Trump say in his speech today? Will he say China 10 times? If I were to say, before I came on the stage, I would create my own mention market. I'm going to say Solana 20 times and then bet on that because I can just change the outcome of that. How do you think about that when it comes to the incentives behind permissionless market creation?
There's a pretty cool self-selecting mechanism for markets. Like, so on Melee specifically, you can get rewarded for not only being correct in an outcome, but also being early to an outcome, and that kind of provides a combination of like trading a token with trading on a prediction market. And so there are different metrics you can track to, determine what types of market you want to participate in. And a question we get frequently is, what if I make a market and then someone else makes the same market? Do their market not make it to the front end, or does it just go P2P? Like, how does that get resolved? And the answer is, the same way it works when you're launching a meme coin on a launch pad. Like when, to use an example, Peanut the squirrel got killed, rest in peace. There were many tokens launched about that topic specifically, but one version of it was canonicalized by the community for various metrics. It's how much is insider held, how diverse is the holding pool, how big are their socials, different things like that, right? And so there are going to be similar metrics that you can do to track the health and likelihood of a market playing out in your favor. Obviously, if you create a market and then you come up on stage and the market is based on what you say on the stage, I'm probably not going to participate in anything except for the side that has the vast majority of the volume in it, because I know you created it and I know that you have some influence over it. But if there were a more neutral party that was unrelated to any of us or anyone in this room, then I would be more inclined to do it. Obviously, that's a pretty specific example, but it can be applied to more markets overall. Like if Iowa State Cyclones put up a market about who's going to win the Iowa State game, you're probably not going to want to bet in that one. You might want to do it for like just a fan of college football in general. So there are very interesting self-selecting things, and it's really more of just a user education problem than it is a problem of like the underlying mechanism.
Got it. That makes sense. That seems to be kind of a common thread on a lot of things in crypto, kind of including prediction markets tangentially. There's a lot of education that kind of needs to be involved on, this is how this works. You're not going to get burned. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. Mike, maybe I'll pass this one to you on kind of why now. Like, why are we talking about prediction markets today? I think Polymarket and Kalshi, they've been around for years, actually, going back to kind of 2020, probably. Obviously, Polymarket in particular, but really both were in the news a lot when it came into the election almost a year ago now. People on CNBC and all the news were pointing to where the markets are. But that was almost a year ago. It seemed like the hype died down a little bit, but now in the past month, 2 months, 3 months, people are kind of ready to go, back excited again about prediction markets. Where do you think that hype's coming today?
I think the simple answer is everyone is gambling, just hard gambling, like everyone. When I was in college, this is when daily fantasy was first coming out, and there was like maybe two, out of my friend group that were doing it. You go to a college now, anyone of age is gambling, and even if they aren't of age, they're finding a way to gamble. So we've seen this mass financialization of everything, and I'm actually shocked there's not more regulations kind of like taking it back. One could argue it's like worse than drugs, honestly. One thing, you're betting on, a football game. Next thing you know, you're betting if, Jesus is coming back. And, you might think that's a good bet. That's up to you. But yeah, it's everywhere. We will be betting on everything and anything. And I do love that concept of prediction markets where, sure, anyone should be able to make a market. If you have insider info, you should be able to use it. I actually think there will be a rise of another layer of prediction markets where people are gambling in like shadow markets, where most of the traffic to a poly market, and this is why it's become so popular, or during the election, Kalshi, whatever have you, most of it's not even actually betting. They actually just want to see the odds of something. And no one has actually tried to sell that. So if you create like a shadow market where you only have a group of people trading, you can actually sell the outcome of that without allowing everyone to see it. And I think that will be incredibly popular in the future. But yeah, I think the easiest answer is people just love gambling. It's the new form of entertainment. No one's doing, and I saw like people are drinking less. Maybe they're just gambling now,
Or you can gamble on how much people are drinking. Combine those two things. Eli, speaking of hype, how do you think about the hype around prediction markets from an investment point of view? Where are we in the hype cycle? Are we kind of overhyped right now? Are not enough people talking about this, investing in this? There's articles going around this week about how Polymarket's rumored to be getting term sheets at a $10 billion valuation, and Kalshi's thinking about raising at $5 billion. And is that a lot? Is that a sweet deal? Kind of where are we in that cycle right now?
Yeah, I mean, $1 billion, $5 billion is a big number, obviously. The way I think about it is like, in all of finance, is like the goal of investors has been like, I have a view about the world and I want to find a way to express it with the instruments that I have available. Like I think, there's that famous story of SBF at Jane Street, and they wanted to bet on the presidential election and they thought Trump was going to win, so they shorted a bunch of emerging markets or something like that, right? But like what they were trying to do is like they had a view on the election and they wanted to express that view and make money on that view in whatever way they could. The market for that is probably just infinite, or like the market for all of finance. Prediction markets are just I think the first order correct way to make those like instruments. Like why do you need to go and like ask Goldman Sachs to make you some swap on emerging markets when you could just go and bet on the actual outcome of the election? That seems like a much more efficient or just like a better way to do things. So yeah, I mean, 10 billion, 5 billion, it's a lot. But I think, all of global finance is a pretty important and pretty interesting market as well.
And Nick, as these markets and this mechanism of betting or gambling or predicting gets more embedded in kind of people's investment strategies or just kind of entertainment strategies in the next couple of years, whether it be kind of crypto native folks or beyond, what do you think kind of the mechanism through which they'll be doing that is? Whether it's its own platform like a Melee or like a Kalshi, like a Poly Market, or do you think it'll be like embedded within applications that already have an audience, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, things like that?
Yeah, so I see the basic categories of all prediction market platforms or projects being four. So there's platforms, that's like Polymarket, Kalshi, and Melee. You set odds on your own platform, and there's like resolution on the platform. Resolvers, which live underneath, and that's the mechanism that is used to resolve markets. There's front ends or wrappers, or whatever term is best. That's just an alternate access point to platforms. And then there's a DeFi layer that can live on top of a platform as well. And so it's just like anything. It's like, where is the value going to accrue in AI, for example? It's like, it's either going to accrue in like the very, very deep model companies where like the actual like value is being created for people to expand on top, or it's going to be created at the level that the user is directly interfacing, right? So like Kalshi acting as a platform underneath Robinhood is both good for Kalshi because it's more volume to their platform, but also valuable to Robinhood because they don't have to do all the legwork to set up that platform, but still get many of the benefits and the ability to just charge a slight fee for that user flow. So yeah, I think that both have obvious room for contributions in the market, and it's just a matter of which, if you're like a project that's just starting up, which one do you feel is less competitive? It feels like if you want to do a platform, you should iterate sufficiently on the pricing mechanism in the platform, because if you're just doing a CLOB or an AMM, there's like no reason to be on your platform over a Kalshi or Polymarket because there's just way more liquidity there. But it's also probably going to be a little bit harder to compete just because of the Cambrian explosion of the front ends that is happening. So it's kind of just like pick your battle.
Awesome. Well, I have one rapid fire 2-sentence answer or less question for everyone. Then I'll leave some time for questions at the end. Jerry, I'll start with you. It's November 1st, 2028. The 2028 election is 1 week away. What prediction market has the most volume on that market? Is it Polymarket, Kalshi, something that already exists today, or is it a totally new market that doesn't exist?
Right now, I'll put my money on Kalshi because of their Robinhood integration. But I think maybe more likely than not, there might be a third player that is innovating on some other vector that neither the first two are. And so, like, maybe as an optimist, I would love to see more players come into the field and continue transforming this pretty nascent space for now.
Nick, what will the Solana-based prediction market ecosystem today, what can people at Solana Boston be excited about 1 year from now?
I mean, obviously, Melee markets leading the charge, but there's many more. There's advantages of just network economies of being in the same chain. Kalshi obviously doing a lot of work with Solana, which is fantastic for just the general ecosystem of being a prediction market. on Solana. Like if you're choosing a chain, you want to choose one that already has existing infrastructure and users that are used to participating in markets like that. So there's definitely network effects that are beneficial for being on Solana specifically. So I imagine just kind of having the first starter advantage of having platforms like Melee and Cauchy starting out on Solana will make it pretty a good place to be.
Eli, either in the near or medium term future, do you think hedge funds, whether they be kind of crypto native or more TradFi, will have traders dedicated to prediction markets?
Yeah, I mean, they already do, right? Like, I think SIG has a pretty robust kind of traders on like their sports desk and politics desk that put money into Cauchy. But no, I guess the short answer is yes, it makes sense. It's the cleanest way to express views that you have in the world, assuming these markets get big and liquid enough.
And finally, Mike, will Polymarket ever do an airdrop?
Yeah, I don't know. Can't comment there.
I think you can bet on it, though, if you have a view.
Yeah. One thing I will say before the questions is I actually think there's a good chance that it's neither Polymarket or Cauchy in 4 years that is the largest exchange. I think it'll be the most unregulated, kind of out there liquidity marketplace. So
Love it. Good take to end on. Awesome. We have a couple extra minutes. If anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand. We might be low on mics, but I could just repeat the question if you have it right here.
You guys talked a fair bit about insider information and how that affects the success of these markets. How much a risk do you see that playing as far as sort of consumer protections, shaking the faith in the system that they're betting against people who know something that they don't? How does that all play into the growth and the stability of this market going forward?
Got it. So the question is, how much of a risk when it comes to consumer protection and general retail adoption of prediction markets does this insider trading impact have? If anyone wants to take that.
Yeah, I have a perspective here. I think it's, from an exchange point of view, the primary trade-off to measure is like, you want good price discovery, but if market makers get picked off by either people who are manipulating markets or just people who have MMPI or equivalent, then obviously the solution to that is to quote wider and quote, then everyone gets worse spreads and pricing. So it's like from an exchange point of view, that's the balance. It's like you obviously want people with better heuristics about how the world works to put money into those markets, but you don't want market makers to be constantly run over by people and have to quote wider.
I also think there's an element of it that it kind of depends on what the platform wants to do. If you want, like prediction markets are all kind of being categorized into the same thing, but if you want to have like an informational focused prediction market that's used for news in particular, then you want that ability to have insiders or people with privileged information, the ability to speculate on it. But if you're more so focused on like protecting consumers and having like a good user experience from like a speculation standpoint, then there are things you can do to limit that or attempt to limit that. So to say broadly prediction markets is hard, but like niche specific prediction markets will have their own solutions.
Right here.
Actually, the question that I have is related to the point that talking about like a niche prediction market. Like I'm thinking, like for example, like all these stock, like earning. For example, analysts might have a certain kind of domain knowledge about the earning. So is that some kind of differentiated, like a market prediction marketplace that actually can serve a very niche people and be able to create some outcome that actually can impact some economic activity as well. So that's
Got it. So I think the question is, will prediction markets, some in particular, serve very niche markets on purpose, and maybe even markets that they hope might incentivize activity in the real world? So maybe having to use a market to provide a financial incentive for something to happen. Is that the question?
I mean, to the second point, yes, and there's like varying levels of legality surrounding them, right? If you set up a market, it's like will this person be alive? There's a risk that you've set up a bounty on someone's head, which isn't good. But there's like monitoring on the front end that you can do to prevent that. But more broadly about like niche specific markets, I think platforms are going to stay pretty agnostic to the topics that are on them, spreading themselves out across finance, crypto, sports, everything like that. But where it gets interesting is the front ends, where you can have a stock specific front end that's going to be trading based off of just have the earnings of companies as a metric on there, or the price of a stock, or something like that, or like a sports specific one, right? So what I foresee many of the gambling companies of today transitioning into is less of building out their own platform for prediction markets, but instead using their existing user base on like a DraftKings, for example, to still retain the users that are interested in speculating on sports, but utilizing the price mechanics of a prediction market on the back end to enable their bettors to have a better experience.
Great. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But thanks, everyone, and keep on predicting.